Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction House taking a look at some of the interesting guns that are in their upcoming regional auction. So when we think of Japanese rifles, normally we think of Arisakas, Type 38s and Type 99s, the World War II stuff. However, there were a number of rifles that preceded those Arisakas, and those are pretty interesting too, and a lot fewer people are familiar with them. So the very first domestic Japanese military rifle was the Type 13 Murata. It was introduced in 1880. It was a single-shot black powder cartridge rifle. It only lasted a couple years, 5 years in fact, before the Japanese military decided to make some updates to it and turned it into the Type 18 Murata. Now it was called Type 18 or Type 13 because of the years that they were adopted in the Meiji era. So they were measuring years based on how long a certain family had been in the emperor's position ruling Japan. 1880 was the 13th year of Meiji, and 1885 was the 18th year. So this is a Type 18 Murata. It has a number of improvements. They strengthened some areas of the tang. The early ones had some problems with the stocks cracking. The most obvious at-a-glance difference is that the Type 18 has 2 barrel bands on it, where the Type 13 had 3. So interestingly, it was actually the Winchester company that manufactured all of the tooling to make these Type 18 Murata rifles. They had done some of the engineering to improve the gun, to improve the design, strengthen it, and it's kind of cool that in 1885 the Winchester company had its marketing and sales folks out there, and it was making connections in places like the Empire of Japan. So the guns were actually manufactured almost entirely in Japan, with the exception of a few prototypes, but the tooling for them came from the US. So why don't we bring the camera back here and let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of the details on this rifle, because there's some neat stuff that carries over to the Arisakas, but it's quite a bit different, back in the 1880s. Mechanically, of course, there's not necessarily a whole lot going on with a single-shot bolt-action rifle. This is a cock-on opening bolt. That's why it was a bit stiff there. And you open the bolt up, you drop a cartridge into the tray here, close the bolt, pull the trigger, and fire the gun. You can see the striker is cocked there. They made about 80,000 of these, and they started with the existing serial number from the Type 13 Muratas. So they start at about 70,000, and they go to about 151,000. This one is mismatched. The receiver is 138 or so, and the bolt is 124,000. They did also make about 10,000 carbines. Those are quite a bit rare, obviously. Now you'll see that there's a big screw head in the bolt. And the reason for that is that, very much like the Dutch Beaumont rifles, these do not have a coil spring in the bolt. They actually have a big V-spring right inside here, and that's what provides the force for the firing pin. Now that wasn't really the best design. Not a whole lot of people ended up doing that for very long because those V-springs were a little bit wonky, and they didn't always have enough power to detonate a primer. Certainly they wore more badly than a coil spring. We can also take a look at some of the markings here. There are quite a few on a Murata. On the right side, behind the bolt, we have this, which in Japanese, we're going to read it from the top down. This says Meiji in 2 characters, and then 10-8 year. So this describes it as being an 18th year of Meiji rifle, which, as I said, is 1885. While we're here, we can look at the top of the rifle, and you can see that marking. That is the Imperial chrysanthemum, and it has been X'd out. Now it's kind of interesting, that's a lot smaller than the chrysanthemums most people are used to on Arisakas, but it is the exact same symbol, and for the exact same reason. It identifies this weapon as being personal property of the emperor. And while we're used to the defaced chrysanthemums being a symbol of a surrendered Arisaka, in this case it just means that the rifle was removed from Army service. So it might have been sold as surplus. A lot of these guns were converted into shotguns after they left Army surplus. It might have been used as a training rifle. Any number of things that would take it out of military service, and thus it would no longer be considered the emperor's property, and so they would deface the chrysanthemum to indicate that. Up in front, we have a serial number, and the Japanese did use Arabic numerals for serial numbers all the way back to 1880. And then we have 2 series of characters, and again, these are read from the top here down the length of the rifle. And this first one translates to Empire of Greater Japan, Murata rifle. And then, so that's the designation. And then back here we have a second set that translates into Tokyo Artillery Arsenal Rifle Factory. So, as with most guns, we're going to have the make and model up here and the manufacturer back there. All the information you need. The sight is rather kind of interesting in that it is actually marked all the way down to 200 meters. So that's 200. That's about as short of a range as you ever get on older military rifles. And then if you want to shoot at longer range, see if we can get the light to reflect on there. Just right. There we go. You can kind of see it there. We've got up to 1,500. So these start at 5 and go up to 13, and then 14 is that notch, and 15 is using the very top. As with many early black powder cartridge guns, the bayonet on the Murata is side mounted. So we've got our bayonet lug right here. You'll notice it's also serial numbered. A lot of the parts on these Muratas were in fact serial numbered. All right, one last thing I want to show you is bolt disassembly. We actually have, this screw holds in the trigger. This screw is our bolt stop. So if I take out this screw, and it's kind of neat that they only threaded the very front of the screw so that you don't have to unscrew very much to take it out. Once that is out, now pull the trigger to drop the sear, and the bolt comes out. Which gets me to my next point, which is that the extractors are often missing on Muratas. Because there's nothing holding these in. This isn't broken. This is how they were manufactured. The extractor simply sits in this groove right here, so it can rotate as you open and close the bolt. And there's no way for this to fall out when the bolt's in the rifle, so it's secure in that sense. But once you take the bolt out, the extractor just comes off. So for the folks who are interested, the Murata was an 11 by 60 rimmed cartridge, and it fired about a 416 grain projectile at just under 1,500 feet per second. So pretty standard for that sort of cartridge. There's our firing pin in there. And then this striker assembly is connected to that, and it is powered by a big V-spring inside here. I'm not going to pull that V-spring out because I don't want to mess with that. I will leave that to whoever decides to buy this rifle. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I always like looking at interesting black powder cartridge rifles, and this is a fairly unusual one. So if you'd like to add this to your own personal collection, get started on a real, complete collection of Japanese rifles, you have the opportunity to do so. This will be coming up for sale here at Rock Island at the end of June, and you can click the link in the text description below. That'll take you to Rock Island's catalog page on it. You can see their description, their photos, and most of the guns in the regional auction are in lots, so you can see what else it comes with. Thanks for watching.